What really happened in 1970? What the whole world was waiting for. If the name Apollo sounds familiar, leave your comments below, grab your coffee, and let's move on to the video.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
In the 1960s, people were searching for adventure and progress. Amidst this quest, the Apollo program emerged. The goal of this project was to send humans to the moon. In 1967, the first Apollo mission, Apollo 1, was launched, but unfortunately, this attempt ended in failure. Soon after, several more tests were conducted, and finally, with Apollo 11, humans set foot on the moon for the first time and returned safely to Earth. This mission was regarded as humanity's greatest leap in space exploration, and Neil Armstrong's words, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," were etched into history books. Later, Apollo 12 successfully marked the second time humans walked on the moon. In April 1970, the world witnessed perhaps one of the most dangerous and dramatic moments in space exploration. Apollo 13 was set to be NASA's third mission to land on the moon, but it ended with a very different story. Instead of watching astronauts walk on the moon, the entire world witnessed the survival struggle of three brave men stranded in space. A ruptured oxygen tank, a spacecraft drifting helplessly in the deadly cold of space, a crew armed with limited resources, and the creative solutions of engineers in Houston. How did this event become one of the greatest engineering triumphs in history? The beginning of Apollo 13 was filled with hope. On April 11, 1970, when it was launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, both NASA and the global public were confident that another successful lunar mission would take place. The mission was led by one of NASA's most experienced astronauts, Jim Lovell, who had previously flown to the moon and back on the Apollo 8 mission. This time, he intended to set foot on the lunar surface. Alongside him were pilots Jack Swigert and Fred Haise, a crew equipped with high skills and experience. According to the mission plan, Apollo 13 was to land in an area called Fra Mauro, where they would conduct scientific experiments and collect samples from the lunar surface. However, fate had different plans for them. About 56 hours after launch, the Apollo 13 crew was unexpectedly shaken. An oxygen tank in the service module exploded, throwing the spacecraft into chaos. This explosion marked the beginning of a series of disasters. Following the explosion, the electrical and water systems of the spacecraft were severely damaged. At the same time, the fuel cells, which were the spacecraft's primary power source, were also knocked out. This jeopardized both the power supply and life support systems of the spacecraft. Astronaut Jack Swigert's phrase, "Houston, we have a problem," succinctly captured the dramatic situation of that moment. The ground control center in Houston quickly tried to grasp the scale of the disaster. Apollo 13 had transformed from a lunar landing mission into a desperate effort to bring three astronauts safely back to Earth. The mission was redefined, focusing on saving the lives of the astronauts rather than reaching the moon. At this point, both the astronauts and the engineers on the ground displayed extraordinary creativity and problem-solving skills. They had to devise new ways to sustain life in space, as the lunar module, LM, originally designed to carry two astronauts briefly to the lunar surface and back, was now to serve as a lifeboat for three astronauts over an extended period. The lunar module had limited amounts of oxygen, water, and energy, so every gram of oxygen, every drop of water, and every unit of energy had to be carefully managed. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the engineers in Houston came up with incredibly creative solutions. For instance, they constructed a carbon dioxide filter system using available materials on the spacecraft to reduce carbon dioxide levels. This allowed the astronauts to breathe clean air and increase their chances of survival. Millions of miles away from Earth, deep in space, while the astronauts grappled with technical issues, they also had to contend with extreme cold. The temperature inside the spacecraft began to plummet rapidly, and the astronauts tried to keep warm with blankets and clothing. However, even these physical challenges did not completely break their spirits. Jim Lovell continuously boosted the morale of his crewmates and maintained coordination with the team in Houston. Meanwhile, the Ground Control Center in Houston was also considering every possibility to ensure the astronauts' safe return. They reprogrammed the lunar module to be used during re-entry and provided the astronauts with the necessary instructions to stay on course. The process of returning to Earth became a race against time. After making a loop around the Moon, Apollo 13 needed to enter a trajectory back to Earth. However, this maneuver was extremely risky given the spacecraft's current fuel levels. Additionally, the angle of atmospheric entry was critical. A few degrees of deviation could have resulted in the spacecraft either burning up in the atmosphere or drifting into the depths of space. Fortunately, both the astronauts and the team in Houston successfully executed this highly complex maneuver. Apollo 13 was now on its way back to Earth, but the danger was not yet over. The safe return of Apollo 13 to Earth was still fraught with uncertainties. As the spacecraft re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, both the durability of the heat shield and the integrity of the equipment would be put to the ultimate test. The intense friction in the atmosphere would generate thousands of degrees of heat on the surface of the spacecraft. At this point, the astronauts transitioned to the command module, pinning all hopes on the successful re-entry of the spacecraft. As the command module approached the Pacific Ocean, the entire world held its breath, awaiting this historic moment. On April 17, 1970, the command module of Apollo 13 safely splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. Rescue teams quickly mobilized, and the astronauts were safely extracted from the module. Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Haise had survived the harrowing days in space and returned to Earth unscathed. Although Apollo 13 did not land on the Moon, this mission went down in history as a testament to NASA's and the astronauts' engineering prowess, resilience, and creative problem-solving abilities. This event was dubbed a successful failure because NASA demonstrated its commitment and ability to protect human life, even in the worst-case scenarios. The story of Apollo 13 is a testament not only to technological innovation and engineering skill, but also to the resilience of the human spirit. This mission was not just a rescue operation, but a victory for humanity. The challenges faced by Apollo 13 highlighted the inherent risks in space exploration, but also demonstrated how these risks could be successfully managed. We have come to the end of a beautiful video. See you in the next video. Goodbye.